Hey robot fans, welcome back to the build. As you can see, I am very digitally dressed up today. That is because if the Facebook chatter is any indication, this will most likely be my most viewed video of this series. Today we are going to build and install the infamous, the elusive MacroBinoculars. So let me change into some more appropriate work clothes and we'll get started right away. So this whole process started when I first got my helmet. I made some paper cutouts to get a general size of the binoculars, and from there I stepped it up to some 3D printed silhouettes, started measuring and making some additions and subtractions over a couple of rounds. The rounds just got more and more complex with the 3D silhouette, and finally that whole method was kind of tapped out and I knew I was going to have to make a 3D model. So without having to model the whole helmet, Autodesk makes a great program called Remake, and Remake will take a group of pictures and turn them into a 3D model. The trick with that is that you really need to have even lighting, and the more tracking points you can have on the helmet, the better. So the first time I did it, I was really lacking in these two areas. I didn't have even lighting because the helmet is one color without a lot of shadows on it, and two, my shadow from when I was taking the picture was showing up in different spots in each picture as I moved around the helmet. So my first solve here was really terrible. Luckily I had these little marker stickers from a previous project that I was able to put all over the helmet, and to help out the even lighting I took the pictures outside during dusk and not in the direct sunlight or direct shadow, and that really helped. So my second solve was a lot better. It was still a little wonky, but I was able to use this to size out some issues with the binoculars. I also built out a cleaner version of the main parts that I needed to work with, like the ears and the mohawk. And from there I was able to really start building in complexity with my little testers, and that went through a few more rounds until finally I had something that's starting to really resemble the binoculars. And after a few rounds there, I was able to add on all the greeblies and everything and do one complete full binocular printout, which turned out really well. So yeah, these printed out really well. I have all of the greeblies attached to it that need to go on there. I have the front piece. You could see through them. I doubt you're going to be able to pick that up on camera, but you could see through them if you're looking through the helmet, which is good. So I think as far as the outside of these binoculars goes, this is really where we need to be. I'm going to probably put a little pause here because now it's time to shift to the other half of these binoculars, which is getting them installed on the helmet. And to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is cut a ridge in the ear here, which is where these things are going to rotate. And in addition to that, I think I'm also going to do the old Vincent van Gogh here and just hack off the top of this ear. The goal being that eventually I'm going to put some mounting hardware in through the hole and just 3D print this little ear greebly that goes on top here. So yeah, this is going to be a pretty dangerous cut. I'm scared to do it, but yeah, this ridge going across the top here and cutting off the end of this ear, I think it's a necessary evil, and that's what's next on the chopping block. I know I said I was going to cut those ridges out first, but something about sawing through these two ears was just a little too irresistible, so I grabbed a jeweler's saw and it worked like butter, cut right through the two end caps. Next up, I marked out where I wanted the ridges to go along the top of the ear, and I intended on just using the same jeweler's saw to score out the lines, but it worked so well I just kept cutting and the line came out perfectly straight and smooth. I took it outside, did some final sanding, and I think we're all set here. I enlarged the holes on the side of the ears, and this will eventually be access to the inside of the helmet for all the mounting hardware needed to attach the binoculars. Lastly, I added some Bondo to each of the sides just to smooth out some of those cuts. Then I reprimed it with some gray so that we don't have to look at that ugly dark brown anymore. And now I think we can put the helmet down for a little bit and focus on the inside mounting structure. So let's take a look in 3D Studio Max. Okay, here we have a 3D model of the ear hole. I'm going to show you the 3D printed piece that I made. It's basically just a cap. It has a little bit of a brim that'll attach to that cut out rim, and the inside is a cylinder with a smaller cylinder that'll push up against the bearing, which we will see in a few minutes. There is a hole straight through and a few recesses here. So the first recess is for an embedded nut. This nut has a little bit of a gripper that'll dig into the plastic, and this will go right into that recess there. This obviously accepts a screw. This is going to be an M5 screw. This will push into here. It actually goes a bit further than the edge of this piece and sits inside. Between the embedded nut and the plastic, this will hold this really secure and give us about 10 millimeters to work with on the inside. On those 10 millimeters, we're going to put a bearing. This bearing is what's ultimately going to give us our rotation for the binoculars on each side, and to do that I built a little bit of an extension to the binocular arms, which looks like this. So it has a rim, and if we look at the inside part of this arm, you can see I have a recess built in for that bearing. And if we push it back, I have 2 holes here for set screws, and I don't think they're going to be necessary. I think you could probably just push fit this right onto that bearing and it'll be held secure with a nut that's going to go on the end here. If not, the set screws will definitely hold it into place. On the other side, we have 2 more recesses to talk about, and those are for magnets. You can see I have them denoted here by their polarity. We have the south and north poles here. I purposely mixed up the poles so that the cap that's going to go on top can only fit one way. This way you can put the cap on, do your painting, your weathering, and you don't have to worry about putting it back on right side up. That cap looks like this. Should look pretty familiar. It's the old ear cap, and if we look at the back of that, we have the opposite magnets and a recess for that screw cap. So this will attach to here and you're all set. So let's get all of this printed out and see what it looks like. Okay, I'll print it out with the magnets installed. I also printed out the cap and have the magnets installed in there. And the way that that's going to work is just go like that. And that's pretty much on there. It's a pretty tight fit. To get it off, all you need to do is turn it like a key and it pops right off. If I try to put it on the other way, it repels and it won't let me put it on. But then if I just flip it, it goes right on. So I think this is going to work great. Now we can get both of these, have the other one right here. We can get both of these installed into the ear and test out the ear mechanism. Gluing this thing on is a bit of a breeze. Just a little bit of glue on the outer rim. Push that into the hole and make sure that the magnets are perfectly parallel with the ground plane. Do this on both sides and let that sit for a bit. After that's set, go to the inside of the helmet and put a ring of glue around where the plastic meets the resin, and then that should be a pretty tight bond that's not going anywhere. I printed out all of the updated 3D parts, and from then on it was just assembly. I did a lot of gluing, sanding, gap filling, painting, priming, more sanding, more gap filling, more priming, more painting, the usual routine. When all is said and done, we have a finalized set of binoculars, and all that's left to do now is to do the final install with the finished set of binoculars, all the hardware, all the greeblies, all the magnets, and just make sure everything works. It's also worth mentioning that the mounting system has changed a little bit since I started filming this video. This recess in the side of the arm was built for this bearing, which is an M5 bearing with a 19 millimeter radius. That fit in there pretty nicely, but the profile of it was too big, how far it stuck off the side of the arm. I couldn't get it to fit through the slot of the helmet, so I've switched it out for this. This is also an M5 bearing, but this only has an 8 millimeter radius. So this is quite a bit better. It's also a lot thinner. It's instead of being 5 millimeters thick, it is only 2.5 millimeters thick. And to install this, I've put it inside of this little bearing holder, and this bearing holder slips right into the old recess like that. It's a pretty nice fit, and it's also removable, which is good. You don't have to glue this in. You can trim it to fit the way you want to, and it's better than trying to squeeze the bearing in there anyway. So this works out pretty perfectly. So then next up is just the final install of the binoculars. The 2 stems slip right into the sides of the helmet here. Then it's just a matter of lining up the M5 screw with the bearing recess on the inside. With the hardware installed, we can add our greeblies onto the sides. And the binoculars are all installed. Alright, there you have it. We have a fully installed pair of binoculars, and the best part is I can see through them. I see you! I installed a welder shield in the front piece, just like the one that's going to be used for the visor, so now I will not be that clone commander walking into walls. I can see what's in front of me, not really what's to the side of me, but hey, you take what you can get. That's going to do it for this video. If you need a pair of binoculars for your build, let me know. I have a few available. Next time we are going to do the final preparations on the helmet to get it ready for paint, and as always we are going to end with a progress montage. See you next time.